I never believed in God. In fact, I built my entire career on proving he didn't exist. Faith, spirituality, and afterlife, it was all a joke to me, a fairy tale for the weak-minded who couldn't accept reality. I was the voice of reason, the one who exposed religious frauds, debunked so-called miracles, and laughed at those who clung to ancient myths. My name is Lucy Carter, and I was one of the most influential skeptics on the internet. Millions followed me, shared my videos, praised my brutal honesty. I prided myself on tearing down illusions, exposing the lies people so desperately wanted to believe. I had everything. Money, status, power. My face was on every major social media platform, my brand deals were worth millions, and my words shaped the opinions of an entire generation. But all of that was before. Before I died. Before I saw what was waiting for me on the other side. Before I realized that everything I thought I knew was a lie. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. It started like any other day. I woke up in my penthouse, overlooking the Los Angeles skyline, checked my phone, and saw the usual flood of notifications. A new viral debate about religion, another preacher challenging me to a discussion, my latest video dissecting proof of the afterlife trending at #1. I smirked. Another victory, another day proving that logic always wins. My morning routine was the same. Coffee, a quick gym session, emails from my management team, planning my next big content drop. That day, I was preparing for a live stream. The topic? Why heaven and hell are the biggest lies ever told. I had my notes ready, my research backed up by science and psychology. I was ready to dismantle the illusions once again, but something felt off. A strange heaviness in the air, like an unseen presence watching me. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the endless cycle of debunking nonsense was starting to bore me. Then the incident happened. I was getting ready in front of my mirror when the lights flickered. A power surge? Unlikely, considering I lived in one of the most expensive buildings in the city. My reflection wavered as if the glass itself was shifting. I stepped closer, squinting. For a brief second, my reflection didn't move with me. It just stared, its eyes darker than they should have been. A trick of the light, I told myself. Stress. Overwork. But then the temperature in the room dropped. My breath came out in a mist, and an unexplainable fear gripped my chest. I turned away, shaking my head, forcing myself to laugh. This was ridiculous. I had debunked paranormal nonsense 100 times. There was no such thing as spirits, demons, or anything beyond the physical world. But then came the whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a chill down my spine. My name. Lucy. The voice wasn't coming from my phone, from outside, from anywhere I could rationalize. It was inside me, curling around my thoughts like smoke. I spun around, my heart hammering. Nothing, just my reflection, now perfectly normal. The room was still, silent, but that feeling remained, the sense that I wasn't alone. I exhaled sharply, shaking it off. Psychological suggestion. The mind was powerful, capable of creating illusions when influenced by fear. I had trained myself not to fall for such tricks. I wasn't about to start now. I continued with my day, ignoring the unease. I had a reputation to uphold. My audience expected confidence, clarity, not some paranoid meltdown. By the time I sat down for my live stream, the strange events had faded into the background. The ring light illuminated my face, the camera was rolling, and thousands of viewers flooded the chat. I smiled, launching into my opening statement. People love to believe in comforting lies. Heaven, hell, God. They cling to these fantasies because the truth, that we're just biochemical reactions destined for oblivion, is too terrifying for them to handle. But let me tell you something. There is no afterlife. There is nothing waiting for us beyond death. The moment I spoke those words, the room trembled. A deep vibration ran through the walls, through my body, through the very air itself. My computer screen flickered, the lights dimmed. My ears rang with a pressure I couldn't explain. I felt it before I saw it. A shadow in the corner of the room, a presence so overwhelming it crushed the air from my lungs. The chat exploded with messages. "Lucy, what's happening? Is this a prank? Look behind you!" My hands trembled. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. And yet, the darkness in the room grew thicker, pressing against my skin, seeping into my bones. A voice, deep and resonant, filled my head. "You do not know what you speak of." My vision blurred. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my reflection in the screen, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream. Then nothing. Darkness. A suffocating void wrapped around me, weightless yet crushing, as if I had been swallowed by something vast and endless. There was no sound, no light, nothing to anchor myself to reality. My mind screamed for logic, for some rational explanation, but there was none. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't dreaming. I was simply gone. Then came the sensation of falling, not the rapid, adrenaline-fueled drop of a roller coaster, but a slow, sickening descent, as though I were sinking into the depths of something unknown. I tried to move, to breathe, but I had no body. My thoughts were the only thing that existed, spiraling in a void where time had no meaning. Then, from the nothingness, a voice, deep, ancient, everywhere. "You are not in control." A violent pull yanked me forward, and suddenly, I was somewhere else. I crashed onto a cold, solid surface, gasping, lungs burning as if I had been underwater for hours. Air flooded my senses, but it was thick, heavy, laced with something unnatural. My vision swam as I pushed myself up, my fingers scraping against what felt like stone. The world around me was dim, cast in shades of gray and deep crimson, as if I had stepped into a dream or nightmare. The sky was a swirling mass of black clouds, shifting unnaturally, writhing like living things. There was no sun, no stars, only an eerie, pulsating glow in the distance. I wasn't alone. Shadows loomed at the edges of my vision, figures that shifted and whispered in a language I couldn't understand. They weren't people. They weren't even solid. They flickered like broken images on a dying screen, shifting between forms too fast for my mind to comprehend. The air buzzed with static, and every instinct in my body screamed that I shouldn't be here. I staggered to my feet, my breath ragged. Where am I? My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vast, empty expanse around me. A sound, soft at first, then growing, filled the air. Footsteps, but not normal ones. They echoed unnaturally, each step reverberating through the ground as if it were hollow. I turned slowly, my pulse hammering. A figure stood a few feet away. At first, it was just a silhouette, its shape blurred by the shifting darkness. But as it stepped closer, details emerged. It was tall, draped in something resembling a robe, yet it moved like liquid, shifting and blending with the shadows around it. Its face was hidden, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. The pressure of its presence alone made my knees weak. "You speak of things you do not understand," the figure said. The voice wasn't like the first one. It was quieter, calmer, but no less terrifying. I tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, to tell myself this was all some elaborate hallucination, but I knew, deep down, that it wasn't. The figure tilted its head slightly as if studying me. "You deny what you cannot see. You mock what you do not know, but now you will see." The ground beneath me trembled, and suddenly the world shifted again. I was no longer standing on stone, but in a different place entirely. A city, but not like any city I had ever seen. Buildings stretched impossibly high, their forms distorted, as if reality itself was warping. The streets were empty, yet I could hear the echoes of voices, laughter, crying, screams, all layered on top of each other in a chaotic symphony. Lights flickered erratically, casting long, unnatural shadows. And then I saw them. People, or at least, they looked like people. They walked through the streets aimlessly, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. They didn't speak, they didn't react, they just existed, trapped in a loop of endless movement. I took a step forward, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What is this?" I whispered. The figure beside me remained silent for a moment, then finally spoke. A world without truth. I turned to look at it, confusion and fear knotting in my stomach. What do you mean? The figure gestured toward the wandering people. They, like you, denied what was given freely. They rejected what was offered. Now they are lost. Not dead, not alive, just... A woman passed by me, her face eerily familiar. I froze. I knew her. She had been one of my followers, one of the most vocal supporters of my work. I had read her messages, her praises for my rational thinking. I had even responded to her once, reinforcing her disbelief in anything beyond the physical world. Now she was here, walking in endless circles, unseeing, unknowing. My stomach lurched. No, I breathed, this isn't real. But the figure only watched me, its silence heavier than words. The scene shifted again. This time I was somewhere even worse. Fire licked at the edges of my vision, but there was no warmth. Only an oppressive, suffocating heat that made it hard to think. Figures writhed in the distance, their screams echoing in the endless void. It wasn't just suffering, it was despair, stretching infinitely, an agony beyond comprehension. The air was thick with something foul, something that made my skin crawl. This is where the lie ends, the figure said. Its voice was calm, almost sorrowful. You have built a life on denying what is real, but you cannot deny it anymore. I turned to face it, anger and fear twisting inside me. Who are you? My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The figure didn't move. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand and touched its hood. The darkness that had obscured its face peeled away like smoke, revealing what lay beneath. And in that moment, everything inside me shattered. The face beneath the hood was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was not monstrous, not deformed, but radiant, so blindingly pure that my mind struggled to comprehend it. It wasn't just light, it was knowledge, truth, and something far greater than human understanding. The moment my eyes met its gaze, a force more powerful than anything I had ever felt surged through me. It was like standing before the raw essence of the universe, stripped of all illusion. My mind screamed to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, exposed, utterly insignificant in the presence of something beyond time itself. Then, the world shattered. There was no falling, no transition, just an instant and absolute shift. One moment I was standing in that nightmarish city, the next I was floating in an endless expanse. But this was not the void I had been in before. This place was vast, stretching infinitely in all directions, filled with a luminescence that didn't come from any source I could see. It was not light in the way I understood it. It was alive, breathing, pulsing. And yet, despite the overwhelming scale of this place, I wasn't afraid. There was peace here, a stillness that felt ancient, eternal. It wrapped around me, soothing and terrifying all at once, because in that stillness, I felt something else. I was being watched. I turned, though I had no sense of having a body anymore. There were no defined shapes, no walls, no landmarks, only shifting currents of light and color. And yet, I could feel them. Beings. Entities far beyond me, existing on a level I could not begin to grasp. They were not human, not spirits in the way I had imagined ghosts. They were something else, something older. They were aware of me, observing without malice, without emotion, as I drifted through their realm. I felt their presence press against my mind, not with words, but with understanding. They knew me. Every thought I had ever had, every lie I had ever told, every moment of my life was open to them as if I were nothing more than a page in a book they had read 1,000 times. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, utterly powerless. Then a voice, not spoken, not heard, but felt. You have been given what you asked for. The words rang through my very existence, vibrating in the core of whatever I was now. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but I had no mouth, no form to produce sound. Yet my thoughts echoed in response. What is this place? Another shift, and suddenly I was standing again. The endless expanse faded, replaced by something else. A bridge. Not one made of stone or steel, but of light, stretching across an abyss so deep I couldn't see the bottom. The space around me was both infinite and contained, as if it existed outside of time. Across the bridge, on the other side, was a figure. It was too far to make out at first, but somehow I knew, it was waiting for me. I stepped forward, and the bridge beneath me was solid, yet it felt as though I was walking on something intangible. Every step sent ripples through the air, distorting the space around me. The closer I got, the clearer the figure became. At first, it was only light, too intense to focus on, but as I approached, it shifted, resolving into something more familiar. A man. Not just any man. Him. I stopped breathing. Not that I was sure I had been breathing at all. Every image, every depiction, every painting or sculpture I had ever seen was meaningless in comparison. He was neither the pale, sorrowful figure from Renaissance paintings, nor the idealized version created by modern faith. He was real. His presence was overwhelming, yet it didn't crush me like the others had. His eyes, piercing yet filled with something I couldn't name, locked onto mine. "Lucy," he said. My name spoken with such weight, such authority, yet without judgment. Just truth. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I had spent my entire life denying him, ridiculing those who followed him. I had built my identity on the absolute certainty that he did not exist, and yet, here he was, standing before me, more real than anything I had ever known. My mind rebelled, trying to rationalize, trying to twist reality into something that fit my worldview. But there was no rationalizing this. There was no debate, no argument to be made. The truth was undeniable. I wanted to speak, to ask why I was here, what was happening to me, but the words wouldn't come. He took a step closer and I felt it again. That deep, endless love. Something so pure it was unbearable. It was not the kind of love I had ever known, not the conditional human love that comes with expectations and demands. It was total, complete, overwhelming in its vastness. And yet, beneath it, there was sorrow, not for himself, for me. "You have spent your life searching," he said, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't sound, it was woven into the fabric of existence itself. You looked for truth, but only where you wanted to find it. You dismissed what you did not understand. But now, you see. Tears burned in my eyes, though I wasn't sure if I even had eyes anymore. The weight of everything crashed into me at once. My arrogance, my certainty, my ridicule of those who had faith. I had thought I was so enlightened, so intelligent, above the primitive beliefs of others. But I had been blind. The reality of my existence, of my soul, of everything beyond the physical world was so much greater than I had ever allowed myself to believe. And now, standing before the very thing I had denied my whole life, I felt the crushing weight of that mistake. Is it too late? The words formed in my mind before I could stop them. My voice was small, weak, breaking under the magnitude of the truth before me. He studied me, and for a moment I thought I saw sadness flicker in his gaze, but there was no anger, no condemnation, only something deeper than I could comprehend. "Come," he said, and turned, walking further onto the bridge. I hesitated. The other side of the bridge was shrouded in light, too bright to see beyond, but I felt something stir deep within me. A pull, a longing I had never known. And yet, I also felt fear. Because I knew, without being told, that to cross that bridge would mean leaving behind everything I had ever been. I had spent my life mocking the very thing that now stood before me. And yet, he was still offering me a choice. The question was, did I have the courage to take it? I stood frozen at the edge of the bridge, staring at the figure before me. Everything in me screamed that this couldn't be real, that I couldn't be standing in front of him. I had spent my life dismantling the very idea of him, reducing faith to nothing more than superstition, mocking those who believed. And yet, here he was. Undeniable, unshakable, the embodiment of truth itself. The weight of his presence was unbearable, but not because it crushed me. It was because it revealed me. Every thought, every lie, every word I had ever spoken against him lay bare between us, undeniable and inescapable. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with shame. I had spent my entire life convincing the world that he was a fantasy. But fantasies do not stand before you waiting. He turned and walked further onto the bridge, his robes flowing like liquid light, and I felt the pull again, that deep, impossible longing. It was more than curiosity, more than the need for answers. It was something my soul recognized before my mind could process it. I was meant to follow, but my feet remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by everything that had led me here. Why? The question tore from my lips before I could stop it. And it wasn't directed at him. It was at myself, at everything I had believed. Why am I here? My voice was raw, cracked with the weight of a lifetime of disbelief crashing down on me. He stopped, turning slightly. His gaze met mine, and the sorrow in his eyes was worse than any condemnation. Because you asked for the truth. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. I hadn't I? I had spent my entire career claiming to search for the truth, tearing apart illusions, demanding evidence. But I had only ever searched for the truth I wanted to find, the one that fit within the narrow confines of my understanding. Anything outside of that I dismissed, ridiculed, destroyed. And now, standing in the presence of the very thing I had denied, I felt like a fool. He continued walking, and this time, my feet moved on their own. The bridge was solid beneath me, but it didn't feel like walking on stone or any material I could name. It was like stepping across something alive, something woven from light and energy itself. Each step pulled me further from the world I had known, from the person I had been. The further I went, the more I felt it unraveling. The certainty, the arrogance, the identity I had built so carefully around the idea that there was nothing beyond death. The bridge led to a vast, open expanse, but the light that had blinded me before had softened. It was not harsh, not overwhelming, but warm, alive. It stretched endlessly in all directions, and yet it felt like a single place, like standing in the heart of something infinite. In the distance, I could see shapes, beings of light, moving in ways that defied logic, too beautiful to comprehend. And yet, even here, in this place that should have been terrifying in its vastness, I felt something I had never known in my entire life. Peace. I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I dared to ask the question that had been burning in me since the moment I arrived. Who are you? It was absurd. I knew the answer before I even spoke the words, but I needed to hear it. I needed it to be real, to leave no room for doubt. He looked at me, and when he spoke, it was not just sound. It was something deeper, something that echoed through every fiber of my being. I am the way, the truth, and the life. A shudder ran through me. I had heard those words before, though I had dismissed them as nothing more than religious rhetoric. But hearing them now, spoken by the very one who embodied them, made something inside me break. Truth. That was what he was. Not an idea, not a philosophy. Truth itself, standing before me, unmovable, unchangeable. I felt my legs give out and I dropped to my knees. All the years I had spent fighting against him, all the words I had spoken in defiance, all the people I had led astray, it all crashed into me at once, and the weight of it was unbearable. My breath came in ragged gasps, though I wasn't sure if I even needed to breathe in this place. I was wrong, I whispered, the words trembling, broken. I was so wrong. He stepped closer, and I expected judgment. Expected the righteous fury of the one I had denied for so long. But there was none. Only love. Only sorrow, as if he had been waiting for me to see, waiting for me to understand. I know, he said, and his voice was not angry. It was filled with a sadness so deep it made my chest ache. And yet, I have never stopped loving you. I sobbed. Not because of fear, not because of punishment, but because of the sheer, overwhelming realization that despite everything, despite all I had done, all the lies I had told, all the arrogance I had clung to, he still loved me. A love so vast, so infinite, that I couldn't understand it. I don't deserve it, I choked out, shaking my head. I don't deserve to be here. He knelt in front of me, placing a hand on my shoulder. None of my children deserve it. That is why I gave everything. I looked up at him, my mind spinning, struggling to grasp what he was saying, and then, as if he knew my thoughts, because of course he did, he reached out. And suddenly, I saw. Not through words, not through explanation, but through something deeper. I saw the cross. I saw the agony, the suffering, the price that had been paid, not for the righteous, not for those who had earned it, but for the lost, for those like me. It was too much. I turned away, shaking, breaking. Why? My voice cracked. Why would you do that? For people like me? Because I love you, he said simply. And I would do it again. Something inside me shattered completely. I had spent my life believing that faith was weakness, that surrendering to something greater was foolish. But now, in the presence of the one who had given everything, I realized the truth. I had been the fool. He stood, and when I looked up, there was something different in his gaze. Not sorrow now, but urgency. A deep, pressing knowledge that made my stomach turn. "There is more you must see," he said. A sudden shift, a pull deep in my soul, and the world around me began to change. The peace, the light, the warmth, it all began to fade. In its place, something else emerged. Something terrible. I tried to hold on to him, but I was being dragged away, back across the bridge, back into the darkness. "No," I screamed, panic rising in me. "Please don't send me back." But his eyes, filled with sorrow, only held mine. "You must understand the full truth." And then, in an instant, everything was gone. It was all there, laid out before me in agonizing clarity. Every moment, every choice, every word I had ever spoken, woven together into a seamless living memory. I wasn't just watching it, I was inside it, feeling everything as if it were happening all over again. The first image was from my childhood. I saw myself at 8 years old, sitting in the back of a church, fidgeting while my parents whispered prayers. I had never believed even then. I remembered rolling my eyes, thinking how ridiculous it was that grown adults spoke to someone who wasn't there. I had always been too smart for fairy tales, that's what I told myself. But then the scene shifted. I was older now, in my teenage years, arguing with a girl from school. She had tried to invite me to a youth service, and I had humiliated her in front of our classmates, mocking her faith until she was in tears. I had felt powerful in that moment, proving her wrong, making her feel small. But standing here now, reliving it, I felt what she had felt. Her humiliation, her doubt, the crack in her heart that my words had left behind. I had never thought about it again after that day, but she had. I saw the way she withdrew from others, the way her confidence crumbled. Then another shift. I was in my 20s, my career taking off, my videos gaining millions of views. I watched as I sat in front of my camera, speaking with absolute certainty. "Religion is the greatest scam in human history," I had said, staring directly into the lens, my voice dripping with conviction. "There is no God. There is no afterlife. Anyone who believes otherwise is clinging to a fantasy." The comments had poured in, thousands of people thanking me for giving them clarity, for freeing them from the delusions of faith. At the time, I had felt pride. Now I felt sick, because I saw what I had never bothered to see before. The consequences. I saw a young man watching my videos late at night, wrestling with his faith. He had once believed in something greater, but my words had chipped away at that belief until it crumbled. I watched as he sat in his room, alone, hopeless, staring at a bottle of pills. I tried to scream, to tell him to stop, but I was just an observer, forced to witness the reality of what I had done. More images, more faces. People who had once had faith, once had hope, but I had helped rip it away. I had been so certain, so arrogant in my knowledge, never once considering that I could be wrong. I had destroyed what I didn't understand, and now I was seeing the wreckage I had left behind. The weight of it was unbearable. And then, a final image. My last live stream. I watched as I sat there, speaking with the same certainty I always had, telling the world that there was nothing beyond death. And I saw what I hadn't noticed before. A shadow behind me, something dark, something waiting. The scene faded, and the voice I had heard before, the one that had spoken from the void, echoed through the darkness once more. "You believed you were leading them to the truth," it said, "but you were leading them away from it." I fell to my knees, shaking. "I didn't know," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You didn't want to know," the voice corrected, and the truth of it cut deeper than anything else. The darkness around me pulsed, alive, waiting. The weight of everything I had just seen crushed me. I had spent my life believing I was right, that I was the one unveiling the truth, that I had freed people from the shackles of superstition. But now I saw the chains I had placed on them instead. I had not freed them, I had led them into a deeper kind of bondage, one where they had no hope, no faith, nothing to hold on to when the darkness came for them, and it had come for so many. My breath shuddered as I looked up, my voice weak. "Is this it?" The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. Then, the air shifted. A new image flickered before me, but this was not the past. It was the future. I saw the world as I had left it, cities standing tall, streets filled with people going about their lives oblivious. But something was wrong. At first it was subtle, a slight distortion in the air, a whisper just beneath the surface. Then it grew. The world around them was unraveling, but they couldn't see it. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground, curling at the edges of buildings. People walked past them without noticing, their eyes locked on their screens, their minds numbed by distractions. They didn't see the cracks forming beneath their feet, the way reality itself was beginning to fray. Then I saw the first disappearance. A woman walking down the street simply vanished. No one noticed, no one reacted. She was gone, erased as if she had never existed. Then another and another. People being swallowed by something unseen, slipping away into nothingness. The streets grew emptier, the world quieter. And still, those who remained didn't notice. They went about their lives, unaware that the ground beneath them was no longer stable, that the walls of their reality were caving in. The deception was perfect. They believed they were safe, even as they faded. A wave of cold terror ran through me. "What is this?" I whispered. The voice returned, calm, unyielding. "The world you helped create." The words made me tremble. "No," I breathed. "That's not possible." But I knew it was. I had been part of it, spreading the lie that there was nothing beyond this life, that there was no God, no eternity, no higher purpose. I had helped make a world where people stopped looking up, where they stopped questioning, where they accepted that all they had was here and now. And because of that, when the darkness came, they didn't fight. They didn't even see it. The image shifted again. Fire. Cities burning, people running, screaming, but their voices were silent. They reached out for help, but there was none. And above it all, something loomed. Something vast, ancient, consuming. I couldn't see its form, only the absence it left behind. It was devouring everything. I turned away, my hands covering my face, my whole being shaking. "Please," I choked out, "tell me there's a way to stop this." Silence. Then, slowly, the light returned. I turned back and saw him standing there once more, the radiance of his presence cutting through the darkness. "You were given a voice," he said, "and you used it to turn people away. But I am giving you a choice. Go back, tell them what you have seen, warn them." My breath caught. Back? The thought hadn't even occurred to me. I had died. I had left that world, but now he was offering me something I never thought possible. A second chance. My heart pounded. Will they believe me? The sorrow in his gaze deepened. Some will, many will not, but that is not for you to decide. The weight of his words settled over me. It would not be easy. My career, my reputation, everything I had built would be turned against me. People would call me a fraud, say I had lost my mind. And yet, I knew I could not stay here, not while the world walked blindly toward its own destruction. I swallowed hard, fear clawing at my throat. But for the first time in my life, fear would not stop me. "I'll go," I said. And then, everything turned to light. I woke up to the sound of machines beeping. My lungs burned as I gasped for air, my entire body trembling as if I had been pulled from the depths of an ocean. The sterile white ceiling above me swam in and out of focus, and I could hear voices. Doctors, nurses, a distant murmur of disbelief. Someone shouted for a pulse check. Someone else whispered she was gone for 6 minutes. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. I had been dead. I had stood before him. I had seen what was coming. And now I was back. The weight of that realization hit me like a tidal wave. My body felt foreign, heavy, sluggish, but my mind raced. I tried to sit up, but hands pressed me back down. A doctor, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Lucy, don't move, you need to rest." I ignored him, my throat raw as I forced out the only words that mattered. "I saw him." The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. The doctor hesitated. "What?" My heart pounded. "I saw him. I saw the truth. We're not ready." Confusion flickered across his face before the professional mask returned. "You went into cardiac arrest during your live stream. You were clinically dead for 6 minutes. It's common to experience—" "No!" I cut him off, shaking my head. "You don't understand. It wasn't just a hallucination. It was real. All of it." My voice cracked, desperation creeping in. "The world is not what we think it is. There's something coming. We have to warn them." The room was too quiet now. I saw the glance the nurse gave the doctor, the silent exchange that spoke louder than words. Delirium. Trauma. They didn't believe me. My hands clenched into fists. "Please," I whispered, "just listen." But I could already see it. The skepticism, the rationalizations forming in their minds. They would write this off as a near-death experience, an oxygen-deprived brain spinning fantasies. The doctors left me alone after a while, and I stared at the ceiling, my heart aching with frustration. I had been given a mission. I had seen the truth, but how could I make anyone believe me? My phone was on the bedside table. I reached for it with shaking fingers, my pulse racing. My last live stream had gone viral, millions of views, comments flooding in, some mocking, some horrified, but most calling it a hoax. The video ended abruptly, cutting to black the moment everything had changed. No one had seen what I had seen. I opened the camera, staring at my own reflection. The face looking back at me wasn't the same one from before. The arrogance was gone, the certainty was shattered. In its place, something else had taken root. Fear. Urgency, but most of all, the weight of knowing. I hit record. My voice was steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I know most of you won't believe me," I said, meeting the lens as if looking into the eyes of every person watching. I wouldn't have believed me either. But I need you to listen, because whether you believe it or not, the truth is coming for all of us.